Hello everyone, welcome back to the 0 to 1 code. I'm Mr. Kumar, and in today's video we are going to talk about integration procedure action, or I would call it like IP action in OmniScript. Okay, let's go to the org now. I'm going to create a new OmniScript here and I'll give a name as IP action OS. Similar goes in type, subtype, save it. So now we have our OmniScript here, and I will expand this step 1 here. And in the action section, if we go here and we will find the integration procedure. Okay. So as you might already aware that we utilize integration procedure to do a lot of server side processing, right? So I'm not going into the IP and how it works, right? Moreover, what I will be covering in this video is how you can pass data from OmniScript to the integration procedures and how you can get data from IP back to the OmniScript, and what all our options do we have in the IP action from here, right? So I'll keep the OmniScript and IP as simple as that. Okay. So before I start creating the IP or dragging the IP here, what I will do is I will have two inputs. Okay, so I'll have to input as a text, and I'll name it first name. Similar goes here, and then I'll clone it here and I'll create as a last name. So what we will be doing is like we will be sending out this data to the IP, and we will be concatenating the first name and last name into a full name. Okay. So I'll have the another text box here that would be called as full name. Okay. So now we have three variables here, three text box. Now I'm going to put IP action. Okay. And same thing if you have followed the data raptor actions or other actions, right? So you might be aware that if you put any action inside this step, it becomes an up button. But if you put outside this step, right, then this will be executed when you move from this step to the next step, right? So you might have your another steps here like step 2, step 3. So this action will be executed automatically when you are moving from one step to another step. Okay. So first I'll start with keeping this as a button here, and then we will look over the what properties we have here, right? And what we can do with all these properties. Okay. I might not be covering all of them, but we'll be covering the ones that will be useful in your day-to-day job. Okay. So here I'm going to create a new integration procedure because we don't have anything as of now. Okay. So I'll call it as IP for OS. Okay. So I'm not going to perform any kind of actions here. So what I will be just simply doing it, I will use the response action here. Whatever we are getting from the OS, we will be having it here, and then we will be returning back to the OS. Okay. So let's look at how we can pass the data first. Okay. So whenever we create any of the elements here, right, so it created as an hierarchy, right? So if I go back and if I preview it, and you will see it, right? So if I put a text on this first name, so we'll see this is under step 1 first name, right? So to access the data in IP through the OmniScript, we have to utilize the same hierarchy. Okay. So if I go back, okay, so what I will be doing is I'll use this additional output response, and I'll create another variable called first name from IP. Okay. And simply I will be just returning whatever I'm getting from the OS as a first name. So our data resides in step 1 first name. Okay. And I will go ahead and I will activate this IP version. I'll go back and preview it. So I'll provide test. So if you see, we have step 1, first name as a test. I'll click on this. As soon as I clicked on it, the entire data, whatever we have in the OmniScript, will be passed to the IP, and then in IP we are returning back in our using the response action. And so whatever we are defining in response action as a variable will be given back to here. Okay, so we need to be careful whatever variable names we are returning from the IP, because it might override your other variables here as well. So for example, full name. Okay, if I go back to the IP, okay, I'll deactivate it, and in response action I'll give it as a full name. And I'll go back and preview it again. So test. So you see, you got this automatically here, right? So this is kind of working automatically, like when you're returning from there, right? Even though you are not defining this is his full name from the step 1, right? So you need to be a bit careful here. So and this is one more important thing, right? This is best practice, moreover, I would say. So when you click or when you are passing anything into the IP, right, everything that you see in OmniScript is getting passed, right? And I believe if you have gone through my previous videos, right, where we are talking about data raptor or IPs in past, right, we did talk a lot about send and response transformation options that we have here. So similar thing, right? So the best practices says that instead of like sending everything to the server and then just utilizing only one or two items from there, right? So it's a big payload that we are sending it to the server, and if in IP it is returning, let's say, a bigger chunk of JSON, right? And so it doesn't make sense for us, right? So what the suggestion is that if you think that only items or only variables from the step 1 should be going into the IP, then just specify step 1. Okay, and if you want to rename the node, right, so for example, if you have an IP, right, and that IP is expecting let's say customer name, okay, and because you don't have anything here called customer name as a node, right? So you say, okay, whatever we have in step 1 should go here, and in IP it should be accessible using through customer name. Okay, so by doing that, you might able to utilize your one IP on multiple OmniScript, even though your this OmniScript have like different variables and the other OmniScript have different variables. Still, you will able to utilize because you are able to control how the variable should be passed to the IP. Similar goes to here, right? So IP might be returning a lot of data, right? So you can define which node you are expecting. Similar to this, if you see in the last line of this tooltip, right, node colon node colon node, so you can define which nodes you want, and if you want to rename the nodes, that you can also do it here. Okay, so that's generic thing that you might be seeing this kind of this send and response transformation in data raptor or many other places. It works pretty much same, but it is important for the best practices as well. Okay, let's go back and let's see what options we have it here now here, right? So it was quite simple. Whatever you have in your OmniScript, you can access directly in IP. But let's see. So we have validation required. Okay. So what happens by default? It is set as a step, and then the other option is none, right? So for example, if I mark this field as a required, and if I preview it, so once you click on this IP, right, so it will validate all the form or all the fields that we have here, right? So if anything that is not complete, like for example, this field is not complete or not filled up, right, so it will throw the error. So you will able to execute the IP if all the validation are cleared out. Okay, so now I'm able to execute it. But there might be some scenarios where you don't want this kind of stuff, right? So where you don't want this validation, but you want to execute the IPs anyways, right? So simply you can just go there and make this validation step required to none. So it should work now. So if I go back and preview it, and if I click on it, you are able to see that, guys. So we are getting the full name back. Okay, so whatever we are providing, we are getting back. Okay, so let's go back and let's clear this out. I believe this is making problem. Okay, so now the next option that you see here, this is pretty important for everyone, like invoke mode, right? So we have three modes: default, non-blocking, and fire and forget. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create three IPs. I'll clone it and I'll rename it so we can understand it. So this is going to be default calling. This is going to be non-blocking. Calling, and this will be fire and forgot. Okay, and I'll go back and we'll set up this to non-blocking, and we'll set up this to fire and forget. Okay, so I'll provide something here. Okay, so default calling, if you see, right, so as soon as I click on this button, and so we don't have any response yet, right? So as soon as I click on this button, the progress bar will be loading entirely on the screen, right? And if I click on it, you see, so that means until unless this process is getting completed, you are not able to do anything else on the screen. So you are kind of stuck here, right? So you cannot do anything. And then there is another option, non-blocking calling. Okay, so you will be getting response back. Okay, and at the same time you will able to do other things, like, so if I click on this, so you see this, the progress bar is happening only on this particular button. Okay, so the operation got performed, you got the full name from the IP. See this? Okay, the third one we have here, fire and forget calling. Okay, this is moreover, you can consider this as a future method. Okay, so once you click on it, you won't be getting any response. So your IP would be called, okay, but you won't be getting any response. So far you are seeing this, right? If I'm clicking on it, I'm getting full name back. Okay, if I'm clicking on this, I'm getting full name. But if I click on this, IP got called, but we didn't get the any data, right? So this is how fire and forget works. Okay, and similar thing, like if you put these buttons after this step right here, and if you have another step, okay, so you will be seeing a behavior. I'll put this here. You will be seeing a behavior that you are not able to move to this step 2 until this entire procedure got completed. Okay, so for example, if I preview it now, test, I click next. So you see, we got our full name, but the step 2 didn't came until the process got completed. Okay, so now let's see over the second approach here, and you will able to see the difference here clearly. So I'm providing name here, and if you see here, as soon as click on this, I will be redirected to this step 2, and you will see full name blank. So that means the process is still running in the behind the scene. Okay, you see, so we got to step 2, and we got our full name after IP got completed. And if I move back here, and this is pretty simple, right? So you do execute the IP, but nothing will be written. So you click on next, you will be redirected to the step 2 as soon as you click on the next, and nothing will be written. Okay, so that's how these three options work. Okay, then we have a couple more remote properties here. uh, we won't be going again like for with the every properties here. So use future and use queueable, right? If I mark this as a future, okay, and literally it will be called in a future. Okay, so I have, you know what, I will just go to default calling and I'll mark this as a future. I'll go back and here I will open the Apex jobs. So we have a couple of job already run before, right? So if I go here, provide the name, default calling, obviously because we made it future, right? So we should not be expecting anything back now. That's not possible, right? But if I go and if I refresh back, I should see a future job completed here. Okay. A similar thing would be happening um, if you mark this as a queueable, right? But you need to be very careful. But if you mark this as a future and queueable, then you might be seeing two jobs running for the same thing, right? So you need to be a bit careful here. I'll uncheck this again. I'll skip these options as of now. And then we have extra payload, right? So for example, let's say you are calling this IP from multiple OmniScript, right? But at the same time, you also want to provide some indication to the IP that which OmniScript is being utilized, is utilizing this IP, right? So you can pass some kind of parameters here, right? Okay, so this is my parameter. So I'll call it like extra payload data, and I can pass anything, like I'll pass test data from extra payload. Okay, and same thing I can expect coming into the IP. Okay, and I'll go back here. What I will do here is I will concat these names. Last name. Okay, and if I go back here, what was the name that I gave? Extra payload data. So I'll add it extra payload data and I'll return it as it is. Okay, because this is not in any kind of step, right? So just another variable on the OmniScript. Okay, and I'll name it extra payload data from IP, so we can just differentiate it. I'll go back and activate this. I'm going to preview it. Okay, so we have first name, last name, default calling. So you see we have extra payload data from IP, right? So we got this back. So this is how we can do it. There's one more thing. So when you do it, you can also include fields as well. Like, so if you want to include something from like step one, like first name or something like that, you can do this. First name, step one, first name, right? So you can have dynamic variables here as well. But if you don't want to pass anything dynamic, you can just keep it straightforward. Okay, and this is checkbox, right? This defines that if you do this, right, then these variables or these values will be passed, right? So nothing will be passed from the OmniScript at all. So good feature here. Then we have user action, user message action, right? So you can define this message, right? So whenever you're executing it and you want to show some message to the user. So for example, if you see this, right, in progress is coming along with the spinner, right, you can change that. A small UI thing, but yeah, quite useful for the users, right? So this is pretty much it. Like, I don't see I don't see much complexity here. It's a straightforward. I would say again, like be careful, because consider this integration procedure as your Apex classes. So all the limits and all things we applied here, right? So you need to be careful whatever options you are choosing from here. Cool. See you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.